We just started watching Call the Midwife, and there's like 13 seasons of that show. So if I don't come home, who's gonna remind him to take Lactaid when he eats cheese?
In a post-truth world, one thing we can agree on is that alligators are not lizards. So I suppose the implication in the story that Dot tells Gator about his name is that Roy doesn't know this, which I suppose is fine. I don't think he's been portrayed as a big dummy necessarily. He does hold a lot of despicable beliefs and has the power to impose them on others. And he has a competency in that. But I do think the emphasis in presenting him as a formidable force has been to show that his influence only stretches so far. That's why in episode 8 it was a lot of fun to see him get humiliated on his home turf, and how it really starts to stand out that his obsession with bringing Dot back under his control leads him to do some things that don't make sense. And I loved how they highlighted this through Danish's downfall. He had quietly become one of my favorite characters of this season, and part of his charm was his competency. As a lawyer, he could make things happen. And that's not to say he was using his powers for good, but he was certainly someone you had to watch out for. So it was a fitting turn that his demise was a direct result of trying to operate outside of his sphere of influence. And by entering into Roy's, he got him to do something that was just plain dumb. If my read on why Danish didn't call Lorraine is correct, that he wanted to help Dot and wasn't sure Lorraine would sign off on the deal he was prepared to offer, then this is all about her. Roy can't let her go, and killing Danish is something that will definitely come back on him. After all, he was in his county, trying to disrupt his election, and messing with Lorraine is not the same as using his influence to threaten the locals. Episode 8 opens with a teaser featuring Danish preparing to interfere with the election. He looks inside a ledger of the debtors of North Dakota and picks out 3 candidates who all have substantial debt and also happen to be about the same height as Roy. As I said, not really using his powers for good. Instead, in this case, keeping with the theme of debt and exploitation to use these guys for Lorraine's purposes. In the next scene, he takes them to court services to have their names changed to Roy Tillman, giving each of them a different middle name, which, based on the clerk's reaction after he assured her there were no mistakes on the paperwork, is a perfectly legal thing you can do. Another thing you can do if you're the sheriff of Clark County is sign someone you say is your wife out of the hospital after she tries to pass a help me note to the nurse behind the counter. Of course, in this case, Roy uses his knowledge that the nurse's brother has been in trouble with the law before to threaten her into looking the other way, for another reminder of how he's nearly untouchable in his neck of the woods. This means that when Witt shows up, you mostly worry about his safety rather than in being able to change the trajectory of the situation. This is Dot's concern as well, so when it looks like things could get ugly, she agrees to go with Roy rather than take Witt up on his offer of a ride back to Wayne. All Witt can do is call Indira to tell her what happened, summing it up pretty well by saying that she reminded him of one of those hostage videos you watch on the internet. She seemed agreeable to it with her words, but her eyes told a different story. The opening shot of the ranch features a windmill that immediately made me think of the one from Dot's dream last week. I went back to check and it's not exactly the same, which as things turn out might be a nod to the inaccuracy of memories. That never seemed to be relevant in one area, the abuse Nadine suffered before she escaped the Tillman Ranch. And upon her return, Roy picks up where he left off. In what he describes as a temporary measure, he chains her to the floor in a shed on his property. And they shoot this as a wide shot, to emphasize just how much of an imposing character Jon Hamm is compared to Juno Temple. This and the way that he expresses that physical domination isn't enough by discrediting everything her life has been since she ran away solidifies the portrait of the character and the hell that's in Dorothy's future if she can't escape. She makes a very compelling case for why she needs to get back to her family. While this works to pull on the viewer's heartstrings, it barely elicits a response from Roy because he views this as a black and white issue. She broke her vow, and anything that follows is fruit from the poison tree. This would include Scotty, and he makes it plain that he views Nadine as his property. As crazy as that all sounds, this is the path he's chosen, and no one in his orbit seems to object. Even his current wife Karen is an active participant in the kidnapping. She's also there to make sure Roy makes it to his debate on time, which means he has to leave, but only after Dot makes him a promise that she'll kill him before all of this is said and done. Left to herself, she displays her resourcefulness again and starts to work her way out of her chains. She manages to get one ankle free before finding out that Gator was ordered to stay back from the debate when he walks in on her. I guess since they first crossed paths in her house before the fire, and especially after episode 7, I've been wondering how things will play out between these two. And in this interaction, Dot tries a couple of different things to try to get through to him and break Roy's spell. First, she tells him that she saw his mother. This was kind of surprising, and I wasn't sure if it was a ploy until she had the realization about Linda and the dream later. When she says it, she does appear to believe that the dream was real, but it doesn't get her anywhere with Gator, who calls her a liar. This scene featured some fantastic acting by Joe Keery, but I wasn't sure if he rejected the idea that his mother was alive because he was afraid to believe it or because he knew the truth. Either way, it causes him to put up a wall, which she uses the insult about how he got his name to get through, but that just drives him away, saying that he hopes she dies in there and never sees her daughter again. It's been hard to find redeeming qualities in this character. Every time you get a feeling that there might be some conflicting feelings that exist under the surface, like you do when he leaves the shed, he immediately does something awful like firing a shot through Witt's windshield. While I do wonder what they have planned for his development, as we see, as he's driving away, he'll have to deal with Ole Munch first because he snuck into his back seat. This reveal couldn't help but be funny, even though Gator is in this dark place in his head. If he thought his day couldn't get worse, I imagine he's about to realize just how wrong he is. The title of this episode is Blanket, with one of the two overt references I caught being when Dot uses the one in the shack to cover up so that they can't see she's slipped out of one of her shackles. The other one is when Indira comes home and finds Lars under a blanket in the middle of the day. Beyond that, I struggled to come up with other references and didn't really see any explanations online that immediately grabbed me. Lars is surprised to see his wife home so early, and she's surprised to see what I presume is his physical therapist topless in their closet. This doesn't feel like the most essential scene in the episode, but it does lead to her kicking him out, and that opens the door for Indira to accept Lorraine's job offer, which we see her do towards the end of the episode. Roy is a little late from terrorizing Dot, but he does show up to a warm welcome at the debate, although he's surprised to see the three lookalikes up on stage next to him. And just as Danish intended, as they repeat everything he says, he spirals into a rage. This scene is just plain funny, and my only complaint is that I saw it in the preseason trailer, so I had a pretty good idea of what Danish was planning. That said, I still laughed out loud when all three of them knocked over their podiums. Roy did not share my enthusiasm, and as he stormed out, he took a shot at the photographer, and the moderator got one too for her tough question. And in my notes, I just wrote, "Hey, comma, that's assault!" exclamation point. Chekhov's tank? Question mark. Danish gets a pretty awesome slow motion strut out of the building scene, and then he hops in his Porsche with his victory secure. It looks like he accomplished everything he came there for, until he runs into Witt at a gas station, and he tells him that Dorothy's at Roy's ranch. Witt gets another call and has to leave right away, and then Danish pulls out his phone, struggles with whether he should call Lorraine or not, and then ultimately puts it back into his pocket. The first time I watched this episode, I guess because it was Lorraine's name 4 times in a row at the top, I misinterpreted this as him avoiding her calls. That led me to think I was missing something, and it kind of took me out of what was happening. Of course, when I went back, it clearly says favorites at the top, which makes it kind of funny that it's 4 Lorraine numbers and then just 1 for Wink at the bottom. And it also makes a lot more sense considering that I think they hinted in the scene when he was committing her to the hospital that he has more sympathy for Dot than Lorraine does. Because of that, he decides to head to the ranch, and turns out to arrive at just the right time for Dot, if not so much for himself. After the debate, Karen adds to his rage by talking about how everyone was laughing at him. She pins the blame on Dorothy, and that sets things up for an incredible tracking shot of Roy crossing his property that seems like it goes on forever, but still isn't long enough. Jon Hamm absolutely nails this, and even though I probably didn't know what the words to the Britney Spears song that's covered here in this slowed down version were, they paired quite well with what's happening. At the end of his walk, he lays into her, which happens off screen. The camera focuses on the exterior of the shed at first. When we do go inside, we see her find a moment to strike back when he tries to rechain her ankle. She wraps the chain around his neck and sort of jumps on his back. What follows is incredibly physical. He tears the chain out of the floor, smashes her against the wall to loosen her grip, and then tries to hit her with the chain as he recites a passage about the Whore of Babylon from the Book of Revelation. She manages to avoid the swinging chain a few times, but is really only saved when Bowman comes in and tells him that Danish is at the gate. Before he goes, she tells him she'll get away, that she's done it before, and he tells her she's always been there. It was the rest that was a dream. Then she says she'll get away like Linda, and he tells her that he'll bury her right next to her. And it's here that her dream of Camp Utopia starts to unravel. And then we'll see it be completely dashed at the end of the episode when she sees them dumping Danish's body under the windmill in the same spot she dreamed she kept the postcard from Linda. To get to that point, Danish had to make his last stand and his plea to Roy, which I spoke about at the beginning. He opens that by pointing out that Roy was humiliated, and that seems to be the thing he can't abide. He asks Danish if he's so smart, then why is he so dead, in a gripping final encounter. And I have to imagine when Danish thought about walking in there, he might have said to himself, what's he gonna do, shoot me? It would seem pretty unthinkable for a person in his position. But I guess the lesson is you should never underestimate a guy like Roy after they've suffered a humiliation. Surely Dot already knows this, which makes her current situation more dire. And we did see Lorraine and Indira team up. So the question we're left with is, how do you take someone with a tank and a private militia out on their own compound? And that seems like a great place to leave things. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.